Long-distance adventures like the Powerstop Trail are really an endurance test for a truck as much as the people who take them. Now look, for me, I love a good day in the woods, so give me 10 in a row and I'm even better. But this week we are rounding out the last of the behind-the-scenes suburban prep with a major cooling upgrade from Derale Performance, what I'll just call end-game Chromoly axle shafts and joints from Yukon, and a few other slick upgrades while I'm at it. We're cramming a lot into this episode, but it is worth the stretch.
Hey y'all, so there's a lot of stuff I've upgraded on this truck over time, but my cooling system is still stuck in the 20th century, or at least the engine fan and airflow part of it, but that changes today.
I have done this way too many times, but hopefully that's the last one.
David is far too good at pulling the fan clutch and fan out of his truck.
Bye, Felicia. Trying to be careful and not goober up the fins on the radiator.
While there's a lot of custom work on this truck, the engine fan is still very much a factory-style setup. Now, it's a proven combination, but it has been a long time since I initially set up this cooler stack, and options for managing airflow have progressed pretty significantly in that time. Also, I had my radiator built long before doing any social media, so here's a bit of detail on that too.
This is a Ron Davis dual pass radiator, 34 inches wide, roughly 18 inches tall. Dual pass is kind of a literal term, actually. Most radiators at this spot, they'll return into the upper corner, that's where your return is, and then it'll cross flow and then pull out of this lower corner. Dual pass means that the way that the end tanks are divided over here means that the coolant comes in here, funnels this way, goes down this tank, and then returns, because there is a plate right here separating internally across this end tank. But that's what dual pass means. It means that the water passes through the radiator literally 2 times before it goes back in the engine.
I feel like your trailer is like the mobile storage unit of the OP, man. All right, so let me show you how we have been running this since forever. Old school engine fan and fan clutch, big dumb parts, right? These are very, very reliable. This 9-blade high pitch fan, it's the biggest one, the most aggressive that GM made for the 6.5, and it's very good. It truly is. I don't want to call this thing junk. It is a very good mechanical fan clutch. And just very briefly, remember how a fan clutch works, right? Your radiator gets hot. It creates hot air. It passes through to this very special spring that then expands, and inside turns a little disc that creates friction inside this hub. That friction makes this hub lock in place. But that means that in order to get good airflow, you actually have to give your truck big RPM, for diesel big RPM, right? 2,500 and norths, and that is when you are adding heat, when maybe you just want to be moseying up a hill, like I found I like to do, and I just wish I had airflow without having to get in a lot of RPM. This is also handy when I'm wanting to just off-road and when we're going up the side of Mount Rainier and there's a need, like a high demand on the cooling system via the transmission, and I want airflow without RPM. So that's where I kind of came to start playing with this idea. I had 2,000 miles of driving to think this through. If you've ever driven back from an off-road trip in your truck, you know that the drive back is a lot about planning. So as that idea turned over my head and matured, and the answer was with me the whole time. The very same people who make this fan clutch actually make the set of electric fans that I'm going to put on this truck.
I headed over to my buddy's shop to conjure a way to mount the shroud to the radiator. You guys will remember David DeMoyes from a handful of episodes. He was a big part in fabricating the Charger frame, and well, I generally just learned a ton from working with him. Derale supplies some universal brackets, but well, this dual pass radiator made that mounting a little more complicated, so I made up some simple stud mounts and he got them burned in on the end tanks and the shroud. just for context, by this time in the prep, I wasn't really dialed in on my new Miller Multimatic AC/DC. And candidly, Dave has welded more aluminum this week than I have. Like, ever.
Okay, it is the next morning and we're back here at the OP, ready to work on the truck. Chris is just pulling up and we're gonna get a plan together on how to get the radiator stabbed and get the fans on there. It's all ready to bolt up, but gotta be able to do some fitment. And then as I've kind of discovered, I didn't quite get all the mud out of the radiator and then the intercooler from the last big trip. So I'm probably gonna have to pull that whole thing, you know, run it through the pressure washer. I'll kind of show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. Get up here on the ladder. So all these transmission lines are gonna fit and clear just fine. That's what these are. These go to the end tanks on the transmission cooler, goes in the radiator. But these over here, these are engine oil lines, and I had to bend this out of the way, but these are the hard lines that go up to the external oil cooler, air to air, comes over here to the oil filter bypass, and then also runs through the oil cooler in the radiator. So lots of cooling capacity, but I'm just gonna have to make new hard lines, and then also some for this, for the power steering lines right there. But if you notice, there's still just a lot of dirt caked up on that intercooler, and I've pressure washed from the backside and from the front. It just shows you how mud can get into everything. So this is gonna have to come out and get cleaned pretty thoroughly all on its own. Derale, I have their engine and transcooler on the truck right now, and I ended up running into them at SEMA. I was all googly eyes over the car that they had in the booth. It was very well fabricated, and so I was talking to them about this whole story that I had coming out of Washington State, and hey, I want to up my cooling.
Oh, what an adventure. Remember how I told you fan clutches are constructed with the hub and the stator? Well, when one fails, you can manually lock it together.
This is now one single orb of cooling power.
Wouldn't you know it, we got some darn good cooling all the way home. And not wanting to go through that ever again, I got really interested in electric fans, and pretty darned quick.
Believe it or not, these are, yes, SPAL fans, brushless. These are the high draw ones for 500 watts, so they spin very effectively, 14-inch, the pair of them. And Derale actually has the ability to make this thing easy, and they made up a shroud for me. They will, you can see that they use these mounting tabs. They're gonna be able to, when this, probably a little bit after this video comes out, they're gonna be able to put this stuff in a shroud, and it's gonna have a lot of catalog numbers tied to it. So for factory applications, if you wanna have a brushless set of fans, which they have, we'll talk about those advantages. If you wanna have that, they'll be able to put them in a shroud for you, and then you'll have extremely high capacity cooling without having to, I don't know, without having to do like full race car type fans. If they can draw air for my thick cooler stack, AC, engine oil cooler, intercooler, radiator, if they can draw across the 6 inches of cooler stack that I've got, I am convinced it will work for just about most other people. I think the thing that is probably most attractive for me personally about this is not an aftermarket fan. Now, don't get me wrong, Derale has integrated this into an aftermarket package that's gonna fit my truck and a bunch of others, right? But this is an original factory OE approved fan that GM incorporates on, you know, a couple of their cars, specifically I think the Camaro and the Corvette. And they can pull the fan for you and me directly off the same pallet that would go to General Motors otherwise. So it has all of those OE approvals. I know that this is gonna be, you know, 100,000 mile, right, kind of rating for a component that's vital to the operation of my truck. The advancement really, and why this is even an option, is that these brushless fans, right? So brushless just means basically sort of solid state, and that there's literal, you know, two pieces of copper are not welding themselves across each other little bit by little bit every time they turn, like your starter motor, like kind of your alternator, and like every other brushed fan motor, sort of up to this point. Brushless, which uses the same technology as in like a brushless drill, is much more efficient for a power transfer. And all that means is that you can start at a very low speed and then have relative maximum high speed while having a lower current draw. All that stuff's great, right, for performance, right? When you're cooling with electrons via, you know, electric fans, all that stuff is just great for efficiency. The way that these are all controlled is through pulse width modulation, or PWM. And there's a fitting that you get, right? So this is a SPAL part. And these all have basically temperature ranges in them. And so they've got a couple of different ones going from, I think, 165 to 215 degrees. We're gonna do the 195 on my truck. But basically you just feed it power, you give it a little bit of information, and then the computers are right in here. I say computers, it's just a little PC board inside this IP whatever rated. I say IP whatever, that's not a technical term. There's a whole series of numbers and letters after it, but it basically means it's sealed from dust and water. I don't know if you've ever shopped for a fan on like Summit or something like that, but there's a whole long list of them that say this is not sealed for dust or rated for any moisture, which is kind of interesting because we drive our trucks and cars through dusty and moisture-rich environments. The PWM controller and the fact that it's a sealed motor means that this is all very easy to install. And back to that thing about OE quality, it's gonna stand up to a whole long list of environments that the OEs spend millions of dollars testing. Actually, if I understand it right, you can literally run this motor underwater. Not that it's advised, but it's kind of that tough. We're gonna start looking on how to seal this thing up. They provide, Derale provides some nice like gasketing material. It's almost like squeegee material, but it's this rubber open-ended stuff. And I guess two things, right? This is gonna seal it. It's also gonna keep like aluminum from wearing on aluminum and it eating the radiator or the fins or whatever, so that's pretty handy. While I take this apart, one important note, we didn't cover it, but these aluminum bungs here are filled with anti-seize because the hardware that goes in them is, well, it doesn't matter what it is, it happens to be stainless, but always make sure that you're using anti-seize on little fittings like that. Those mounting holes, since I made my own, I went ahead and, I was not ready to commit and weld in a piece of aluminum, so we used heat reflective tape.
It's good.
Because it's a spaceship. I think the truck's ready for Mars orbit, kind of just by being in place, yeah. So you get like an 1/8 inch, which this thing sits down in, so it's gonna create a little seal against this side. That's what this will do.
Also, just a piece of detail, those black plastic squares on the back of the shroud are actually flaps that allow air to pass through, sort of as a pressure relief when there's speed-generated airflow across the cooler stack. Like when you're driving on the highway or something.
So there's just a few things that we need to get done. Like I gotta, weld, the bung to make sure that that sensor can read the coolant temperature. There's another little notch I need to take back out of the radiator shroud to allow the steering box. But, those are all just kind of like details that you do when, well, a semi-custom installation. I would make a takeaway for this that, this is still gonna be like very much a catalog type of install. And in this instance, I'm just trying to adapt it to a truck that never would have had this to begin with, but I think it's really worth the effort. Check this out. Hey, David, this thing sucks. This sucks so much. What a marketing campaign, right? These fans suck.
Little projects like this are great homework for me. I usually just take the assembly back to the main shop and return to the OP with the completed part.
This is going to sit on the fender just inside, and I gave Chris 3 positions to be able to mount the switch pros, and the wiring loom is going to run under where all the connectors will live under here. naturally. It's just 063 5000 series aluminum, cut out and actually bent from Sencut Send. I just had to do these 2 welds and then loaded up with some Mittler Brothers dimple dies.
Also, this is a moment when I wish I had met the folks at Seymour a whole lot earlier. The paint on the Lynx was looking a bit shabby, and it was time to freshen them up. Leave hardware store paint wherever it is. I'll put this as kindly as I can. The hardware store paint that I used all those years earlier just didn't hold up. Seymour's MRO stuff dries to a hard shell, but takes some time. It's nearly as tough as powder coat, so the performance is worth the wait. Besides, just a few days earlier, a big old box of Yukon Chromoly axle shafts showed up, and so this was a perfect time to get those assembled and installed. My dad took on the front end work, greasing bearings with new seals, and, well, even fresh friction stuff from Powerstop. Because why not? Now, you look around on the internet, and there are a handful of ultra heavy-duty U-joints to choose from, but, well, for the ultimate strength crowd, they're all using a similar design to Yukon. Needle bearings are eliminated in favor of a bushing, O-ring, and very high-performance lubricant grease with, I think, admittedly short maintenance intervals. If you want to set it and forget it, regular spicers are still great, but my truck tends to spin caps, and I didn't mind the extra maintenance of the super-duper Yukons. In fact, I actually shot some grease in at a couple of points along the trip.
Well, hello, Jake. Welcome to my party.
Pleasure seeing you under
Yeah,
here.
you guys are hanging out in the sun. I found the shade. These U-joints are really heavy duty, but they need some extra lube. That's the compromise. Maintenance heavy, extremely strong. But, I don't know. I've worn out some U-joints, so I think it's kind of worth it.
Assembly is pretty much the same as your standard U-joint and axle shaft. It just uses full circle clips. And just mind the orientation of the joint so the Y, the logo Y, is facing outward. I use sockets and a hammer like I'm doing this on the trail because, quite frankly, that's how I learn. But there are plenty of ways to do this right. Now, 24 hours later, and I do a quick check on the Lynx. The paint is 99% cured with just some of the thicker spots around the weld still left to harden, but look, I'll tell you, this paint stood up to the tires rubbing the Lynx at full lock. There is no substitute for quality, and I am totally converted on the made in USA stuff from Seymour. The axle shafts went back together like factory, and my dad got the front end pieced back together as well. Meanwhile, Chris was prepping the 12-channel Switch Pro to control the fans and some new lights.
More proof that sometimes you just need the right tools and a tailgate to get done what you need.
And then, as if to prove the point, I noticed in the course of painting that some of the Johnny joint bushings were worn and took the opportunity to service them before installing everything back on the truck.
And honestly, these are just not that expensive. I think this whole kit with all of these was about either 70 or 80 bucks. And here's what's nice, why I got them from ORD. In fact, Steven stopped me from going to just Summit and buying the rebuild kit, because the rebuild kit comes with, you know, a new washer, which sometimes you do need that. But most often you just need the bushing. And they've got a real value deal with just buy these things in bulk and rebuild yourself.
Now, if I'd known, I would have done all of this before painting, but I guess we'll just call this another testament to how this MRO paint is just, I mean, tougher than woodpecker lips. With about a day to go before I would leave for Oregon, it was just enough time for one last upgrade. A set of LP9s is an easy upgrade from the LP6s that I had. They use the same plug and harness. The light they throw, both at low and high beam, is next level, and something that would come in handy on the trip.
I'll open the hood if you'll just do the bang on it. All right. It's a standard Chevy hood bang.
This is what people buy Jeeps.
Let's do this. Give me that. I want you to spend just a minute. I want you to talk about, you know, the wiring that we did right here.
So, David got this 12-channel Switch Pros. I asked him to build a stand for it so that we could make it modular. The Switch Pros harness now tucks under, and there's a whole bunch of Deutsch connectors under there. So every system that plugs into it on the truck can be taken off of it piece by piece, or the whole thing can be disconnected, 4 button head screws, and it comes out, and you can service everything in here.
It's so much tidier and cleaner. So this is we'll call this the Rev 1 design from what was there before with the 8-channel.
But before we take anything for a drive, we're gonna do a smoke check.
All right, power on.
So there's that, and then that's high beam. There's low beam.
Important function.
Wait a minute. Oh, hang on. This is never going to get old. I'm very excited about it.
Then we're gonna bring the engine up to temperature and do the first test to make sure that the sensor triggers the fans to start running. Oregon greeted us with epic western landscapes, each somehow more majestic than the last. Throughout, all the truck's systems performed above expectations, and look, that goes for the transmission too. If you remember back from the video, we broke 4th gear sprag on day 0 as we were really leaving the grocery store, but you know what? We still had 3 perfectly working gears, and that was enough to continue moving forward.
I don't like the snow wheel a lot, but I'm having fun. And I don't like the night wheel a ton, but I'm having fun. We put them together, and I think we're killing it.
It's a good day, man. This is the best day of work ever. It's Thursday.
It is Thursday.
Let's go!
And I am ever so glad for that, because I have never spent so much time on such beautiful public land and with such good people.
Look, thank you guys for being here and being a part of all the behind the scenes action. We're gonna get to the giveaway here in just a second, but it's first time to say thank you. First, thank yous to Chris Miller, my co-driver for the whole trip, and is always down to help with a project, whether it's Switch Pro or just hauling something back and forth. Look, man,
I really appreciate you. He's a big part of this channel, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera. Second, my dad, who is always down to grease wheel bearings and help wherever he can so that I can, stay focused on fabricating and, doing the stuff that I like most. And then not last, and certainly not least, is the brands that support this channel. Derale Performance, a huge contributor for this episode, as well as Yukon Gear and Baja Designs. But it's all built on the foundation of Powerstop brakes and the Powerstop trail. So all I'm saying is support the brands that support this channel and our community of off-roaders and hot rodders, right? You want to make sure that our hobby sticks around, invest in the brands that invest in you. Now it's giveaway time. You guys came out and way overperformed, and you left me with a problem. First of all, let's review the rules. Basically, it was 2 favorite comments from the prior week's episode where we did the brake swap on the Duramaxes. Problem that you guys left me is you asked a lot of good questions, and I couldn't narrow it to 2, so we're doing a bonus. There's going to be a 3rd winner. Now stick around through this, whether you're the winner or not. We're going to play this game again next week with a brand new part that I've got that I think is going to be handy, especially for you square body folks. Remember, I picked 3 winners here for this. So first winner is Wheelin' Chronicles. I'm going to tag him here. He's on Instagram and on YouTube. He's got a pretty cool Suburban. Reminds me a lot of what mine was before I kind of went off the deep end with big tires and all that. It makes me nostalgic for my truck. Anyway, his question is, I'm getting rid of my rooftop tent with my new 2500 Rocklander Burb thing build. Lots of reasons, but what made you choose the tent that you've got? So I've got the tent that I ran in the Suburban for this trip was a Gazelle Tents T4 Plus hub. It's a huge footprint. It's like, it has the footprint of the size of my wife's car, right? It is enormous. And that's exactly why we got it. Is we wanted a big tent for family camping it has 2 rooms, right? It's basically Gazelle Tents T4 tent times 2. And the front room, that when we were camping with it, we called it the foyer. We actually put a rug in there.
This time on cribs. So we wanted to have a nice looking foyer. So you can see this is the shoe zone. And then that's where we sit in a circle. And we sleep in the next room.
Everybody was able to throw their gear in that spot, and then we 3 guys, we camped in the next room. So tons of room, easily camped 3 people. My wife and I have taken it. We've of course been comfortable, but we've also taken the dogs, and that's kind of what we got it for, right? Was to have good family tent camping, so that we didn't have to, haul dogs up and down a ladder to a rooftop tent. Though I'm not talking trash on rooftop tents, I think they're great. But for the trip that I wanted to go on, to be able to house as many people and all their gear out of the Suburban and with 1 tent, the T4 Plus hub from Gazelle Tents really filled the bill. As I go through here and get the next comment, let me know if you guys want me to do a review of that tent, take it out in the woods and kind of show you anything about it. There's already some stuff on YouTube about it. I might be redundant to that, but let me know if you guys are interested in that. Use the comments below. And then here, Mills Smithy. You asked a pretty cool question. So first, thanks for the great channel. You're welcome. Appreciate you being here. Your work inspires me to continue moving forward with my own projects. 100%. That's exactly the purpose for the channel, man. So I'm glad that you identify with it. My question is about welding. How do you decide when to MIG and when to TIG? Do you have hard and fast rules that help you decide? Thanks for all your content and keep it up. Well, Mills Miffy. All right, I'll just call you Mills. In any case, so when do I MIG versus when do I TIG? Let me start by saying, you asked are there some hard rules. Yes, there are some hard rules. First of all, you need to be sure that, like, when you approach aluminum, that kind of automatically puts me into the TIG machine, right? I've never been really good with the push-pull aluminum gun, and I don't have it anymore. I sold it with my old welder. So I'm automatically TIG welding when it comes to aluminum. Second, when I get into chromoly, like the engine mounts that I've made for the Charger here, that is TIG welded too. The real answer, outside of just those hard and fast rules, is how fast do you need to build something, and what sort of finish do you want at the end? If you want a blended finish, TIG welding doesn't necessarily have to have a lot of deposited filler. And the less filler you have, the less shrinkage you have, like on a thin panel. That's kind of nice. But man, MIG welding is so fast, right? You can just, you can burn pretty quickly and get something welded up very, very quickly. So that's why MIG welding when you make money, MIG welding, that's why MIG welding is so important in a production environment. TIG welding has its place. I have a strong preference for TIG welding. It's just what I like to do, but I'm going slow and doing a very high quality, or taking a high quality kind of aim.
And that's the reason for that. So if you want to know more about that, just ask in the next video and we'll talk about it. All right, and bonus from ICD Productions, you asked what would you consider your best purchase when it comes to metalworking tools? So I'm gonna knock off two very quickly because yeah, there's a lot of stuff here for sheet metal, but nothing happens without a welder. I think my fixture table is pretty darn handy, but the one that has been the most transformative for me to be able to work on everything, right, from thick to thin and whatever, has been the air compressor, right? There are so many tools that attach to my air compressor, and those are all specialty type of abrasive tools that has just changed the way that I think about working with metal. Now I'm skipping over, right, like I said, the welder and fixture table and, you know, drill press and all this sort of stuff. But it's for good reason, which is those are sort of, in my mind, table stakes to metal fabrication. But you want to really get up your game. It's not just that I have an air compressor, it's that I got a big stinking air compressor. It's the QT54 from Quincy. Let me know if you guys ever want to see any more information about it, but it's got a lot of capacity, flows a lot, you can run any tool on it. And I tell you, when you have that sort of capacity, like the world of pneumatic tools, from, you know, everything abrasive to air cylinders and all that sort of stuff, just opens up to you. And it completely changes the way that you think about, you know, using tools to accomplish some metalworking objective. Right, that's kind of nebulous, but big stinking air compressor, that's the answer. Okay, so for each of those three winners listed here, just send me an email with your shipping address and I'll put together everything and get it over to you, okay? But now, giveaway for next week. Robert's Custom Trucks has supplied us with an 8-channel Switch Pro mount that goes in the cigarette ashtray thing on a square body. It's where the cigarette lighter is and then the ashtray next to it. That's I put my power port there, and I think I put spare fuses in that ashtray. If I still had the 8, I would use this thing. It's a really slick and clean way to mount it and get it out of the way. So rules are the same. Ask a question in this video, anything, and my favorite will I'll pick my favorite, and then I'll ship this to you along with some other stuff. Somebody asked this week like what my favorite coffee is. Cold brew. I've got plenty of work to do here on the Charger. I'm in the middle of engine mounts. Next week, you're gonna see something where we get the workbench back on casters, really good self-leveling casters like you guys know I like. And we're gonna go through all of that. Lots of welding, more junk. The important thing is you will see it right here. And so until then, appreciate y'all being here, and y'all take good care.